Welcome to the Music and Trauma podcast. We're Chris and Terry Potter. We're asking artists, musicians and guests, what are the 3 songs that saved you? And exploring what matters to them about music and mental health.
Okay, well, I'm going to start because I want to say that I am nervous today because we are about to interview somebody who's done a lot of this and we are still very much beginners. So first of all, I'm Terry.
And I'm Chris.
We're really, really excited to have with us Elijah Wolfe.
Hello.
Hello. And I'm going to hand over to Chris to give a little bit more of an introduction.
I'll do a little intro. Elijah's a multi-talented singer-songwriter, author, musician and podcast host. He's the co-driving force behind the band Gravity Drive, who have released 2 excellent critically acclaimed albums. More recently, he's been focused on mentoring songwriters via his YouTube channel, which sets a weekly challenge to write a song about a specific subject. He has a successful podcast interviewing a myriad of interesting artists about the songwriting process. And following on from all of that, he's also written a book, The Songwriter's Handbook, which is full of ideas, resources and inspiration for anyone interested in songwriting.
Yeah.
So welcome, Elijah.
Welcome,
Hello.
Elijah.
Thank you for such a lovely introduction.
So, well, I want to say, how's everybody doing? So we're going to give you a heads up on this one. So
Yeah.
This is the way we go around and give me a little bit of a clue already. And the first thing I'm going to do is go to Chris and I'm just going to say, how are you doing? Because I want an emotion word and it's not always the easiest.
Yeah, I'm a bit, because we're right at the beginning of this one, I'm quite tense. But in about 5 minutes, I'm going to be quite relaxed.
What's the tension about?
What's the tension about? It's about asking the right questions, not stumbling over my words, all of those things, really.
Okay, I'm going to go next. I've already said I'm a bit anxious. At the same time, I'm also really, really interested because you've got so much insider information and so much that we can learn from you as well. So yeah, I was going to say good. I can't get away with that. So I'm anxious, but I'm also extremely happy to be here with you.
Awesome.
So over to you. How's that?
That's great. I feel excited, actually. That's the word I'd use. And curious. Because you're 2 of my favourite people, 2 people I respect, and so it's nice to just have a conversation. And the fun for me with these kind of things is not knowing where it's going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the same as songwriting, isn't it? I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm here for it. So that's
sure.
A different energy is going to come into the room because of the 3 of us. I think they call it the synergistic effect.
Oh,
Let's
cool.
see what happens.
Yeah, exactly that.
Chris, you're going to kick off with some easy-ish questions.
Yeah, let's start at the beginning. What's your first recollection of music in your life? Like, when did you first become aware of music and it start to have some sort of impact on you?
It's quite early. I was in a pushchair in Italy.
That's really
I was about
specific.
2 years old and it was very hot and I was in a pushchair and my mum was applying suntan lotion to my face, so I remember the smell of that. And over my right hand shoulder, over a speaker, I heard some music, and then some Italian people were there, like holiday reps or something. They were wearing red t-shirts, and then I heard the sound of Italian voices going Bella Bella in front of me as my mum was putting sunscreen on. And then I had the opening riff to Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears.
Wow.
And I know it sounds silly because I was so young, but I literally have a feeling of going, what's that?
No.
And hearing that song and sort of knowing at that young age that that's brilliant. And then the memory stops. But every time I hear that riff, it stokes something inside me. So I think that's the first point of kind of being aware of music. And obviously it's evocative because of the sunscreen and the heat, there's sensory stuff going on.
Yeah.
So that was my first memory of music. I kind of feel like the me that I am now was in that baby because I remember thinking, that's a great riff. You know, so good. And the way that I listen to music now, thinking about riffs, is that I know that part of my brain literally went, that riff, something's in that. So that's my first memory.
Wow.
Of it.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that is. That's very specific.
It is quite
Like a
specific.
that's great.
Yeah.
Even down to the holiday reps in the red t-shirt.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really clear. Interestingly, I'd kind of forgotten it till I was about 15, 16. And
Wow.
I remember hearing that tune and going, so that's my earliest. But I also grew up with music around the house, so it was around all the time.
And sort of growing up, was there music in the house and
Yeah.
who were you listening to? Major influences?
So
and stuff?
my dad was a songwriter and he had been offered a record deal just before punk happened. He was doing folk stuff, I think, with a friend. And so the deal got dropped because punk happened and suddenly that was a whole different thing. That's the story, that's his story.
Changed overnight.
Yeah, but we grew up with him writing songs and acoustic guitars. and like pictures of Bowie on the wall and like vinyl albums. So that whole musical world was just there.
Yeah.
My dad would play Dylan at massive volume all the time. So Dylan was just like a constant.
Beautiful.
Lennon, the Shaved Fish album was there. Best of Beatles, Bowie, Eurythmics, Van Morrison, very loud as well. And then also just radio all the time in the car.
That's quite an education.
Great education, because we'd take these trips from Winchester to Yorkshire where my family lives, so it's 5 hours there and back with the radio on. So that subconscious, just listening to pop all the time from across the ages was major. I'd have my face against the glass window watching raindrops, listening to just everything. So that early influence of just hit after hit after hit and kind of understanding subconsciously form and structure and melodies. Like my memory for melodies is something I'll hear in my own writing or somewhere else. I hear a melody go, I've heard that before, and my brain will filter through all the tracks I've heard and go, it's that. They've taken it from that. It's kind of an encyclopedic subconscious knowing of melody from just listening to the radio. Yeah. So it was there all the time, and I think really the moment I decided to make it mine was in year 7. I'd hear music all the time in my head. Other people's music, I'd hear it on loop in my head, but I became aware about the age of 8 that I had music inside my head. It was like a something producing itself as it was going. So I'd hear melody and then I'd hear strings and drums, and my brain would just create music in my head.
So the full production in your head.
And it would just go. So I knew that was happening, but because music at school was a bit intimidating because of grades and I couldn't get my head around the notes thing. I had basic piano lessons, but when it got to keys, it was like my brain can't understand that. So I thought, it's not really for me because there's a respected hierarchy of grades and there's these girls at school. Too technical, and they're really good. And then in year 7 at secondary school, there was this moment where the teacher got the room to stand up and sing, and he would decide yes or no, are you going to be in the choir?
Right, yeah.
It was quite intimidating. So I'd sung and he went yes, and I was like, I can sing.
Yeah, that happened to me exactly like that. Yeah, it's funny.
And then he...
Sorry, just butt in, but I did that, and it was no, you can't.
But it's quite a sort of heavy thing to do to a load of 12-year-olds. But it was, I remember going, I can sing. This person said I can. Yeah. And then he went around the year 7 group saying, who wants guitar lessons? And I don't know why, probably because my dad had done it. I'd made the decision, I'm not going to bother with that because of the musical technical thing. And so in my brain, I'd gone, I'm not going to do that. And then my hand just went like that. And he was like, okay, I'll put you down. I was like, I didn't mean to put my hand up. So then I started learning guitar and found my thing, joined a little band, formed a little band. And they said, someone's got to sing. And I went, I'll do it. And I went, I don't mean that.
Did it again.
I'm too shy to do that. And so suddenly I was like, I'm a singer in a band. And
amazing.
Putting my hand up or saying it was... I didn't expect to put my hand up or say something. So it was almost
an automatic response. Yeah.
From the age of 7 at secondary school, I'm a songwriter. From 12
amazing.
to now, that's what I am.
Because you could, because you realised that you could. Was that part of it?
I suppose I saw my dad do it, so I knew that, well, he can do it, so maybe I can do it.
So you got over that technicality thing of like not feeling like you could actually master the instrument?
I think probably I was into the Beatles at such a young age. I suppose like Nirvana and Oasis and different bands, they would talk about not being technically gifted.
Right.
And they taught themselves. Yeah. So hearing that was like, okay, I can do that. It's just imagination. And I was very, very into the Beatles. And I could read their books when I was 10, so I knew about their world and imagination and how they made things. So it just became apparent to me, it's just imagination, but with sound.
It's true, because if you imagine something, nothing is created unless it's first imagined, right? Yeah. So you've become what you are because you imagined it. Yeah. That's super powerful.
Yeah, that's a whole different way of being and thinking, which is that whole manifestation area is an interesting area, something that I haven't conquered, but it's like you said.
I would argue that you already did because you imagined it and you did it and you became it. So
yeah, to some extent. But you're right, that Bohemian Rhapsody was an idea.
Everything's an idea, isn't it?
The chair was an idea.
Absolutely.
More recently, with the Songwriting for Songwriters podcast, YouTube channel, what was the motivation for you getting into mentoring songwriters, and how did that come about?
It all came to me one January driving to my parents' house. This idea just happened very quickly. Through the pandemic, I'd done some co-writing with Chris Difford from Squeeze. I had these group co-writing sessions where you had like 3 hours to write a song with somebody you'd never met before. It kind of gave a theme. And then you met this stranger over Zoom and had 3 hours to do it. Wow. So that was percolating somewhere in my head. and an art college background of just sort of seeing where something goes.
Yeah.
So those are the subconscious things that are going on. I think there was an idea of my income had been coming from gigging a lot on my own, and I was a bit jaded by doing that so much.
Sure. Yeah.
So I was looking for, like, is there something else I can do here? And so I was just driving, and the idea for a weekly songwriting channel came about where I'd explore something and put it out there.
I loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, you turned my world on its head, if I can just interject a little bit there, because I hadn't written songs for 2 decades.
Right.
And, you know, we've got a recording studio in our back garden, and I'm married to an award-winning music producer, and you came along and went, here's a challenge, why not write a song to this? Alrighty then.
Okay.
So I jumped on, and I did some stuff that I didn't even know I had in me.
That's great.
And I feel like you did that for so many of us, and there was an opportunity there, and we were saying this in the kitchen earlier, weren't we, but an opportunity for so many people to get out of their heads and into flow and produce a body of work. I ended up producing 8 tunes and not doing anything with them, but I love every single one of them because it was a stage that I was going through and a process that I worked through, and I'm having an experience of myself. And I know that you've done that for so many people that were part of that group, and that will continue to be a body of work that you've put out, those challenges for other people to come in and work to. And now, of course, there's the book, and the book is phenomenal because you just literally open a page, and as you did with the challenge, you take a topic, but then you break it down, you ask all the different questions, and you go away thinking, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting because it is actually quite a simple concept, but
Yeah.
just the idea of feeding an idea to somebody is actually really inspiring in a really tangible sense. Like Terry said, it just takes you from not creating in the moment to somewhere where there's a purpose and you can create something because you've got just a little thread of a path, you know.
It's really interesting to hear you both talk about it, because I was aware when writing it that it's really simple, and I want it to be simple. I want a kid to read it and a professional songwriter to read it. And I'm definitely not an authority musically or think that I have any right to talk about how to write a song, okay? Because I know deep down that songs can be about anything at any time, and there's not really a rule to how to write a song.
And that's the point, though, isn't it?
That is the point. So basically, somebody could turn to page 32 and read it and actually go, that's a load of, who the hell's he? That's a load of, but maybe even have a reaction to that, which might make them write a song.
Yeah,
so
right.
Yeah.
That was one of the things when I was writing of, like, if someone's offended by that or thinks I'm talking nonsense, even that feeling is relevant to writing a song. Quite interesting, because a few people bought it who aren't musicians, who don't write music, and the feedback was that they just sat there and read it, boyfriend and girlfriend, and got to know each other better.
Yeah, pick a topic, let's talk about it, let's explore it. Yeah.
So I'm writing a second one.
Great.
And it might not be so geared towards calling it songwriting, because actually the feedback was this is actually good for painters. There's something going on here which is very simple. My first page for the second one is called A Letter Never Sent, and it's based upon the idea of, if you could tell somebody something that you've never told them, who would that person be? What would you have to say? Why haven't you told them that?
Yeah.
Is it because you're scared?
Yeah.
Do you know something that someone needs to know? Why don't they know it? What is it that's stopping you from saying it? Why not go and write this down? You could give it to them or maybe not. When you think about that, if you're a musician or an artist or not, it might just tune into you this idea of, like, actually, I need to resolve that thing with my dad. Maybe he's gone or there's no relationship, or you just can't say that stuff.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to be able to hear it. But for you as a process, as a person or a creator, what is it that you would tell that person if you really could?
Absolutely.
So my background with that is kind of from art college thinking, plus kind of a lot of reading self-help books, plus curiosity. Well, just do something and see what happens. Chuck that ink in the water and see what happens. I guess it's simplicity is important to me, and to not make it too lectury. Creativity to me should be accessed by anybody at any time, and sometimes there's a hierarchy. You know, as someone who's worked with so many people that are either technically brilliant or not at all, but sometimes people that aren't technically brilliant, who it's difficult to work with, have an idea that a technically gifted musician can't get to.
Yeah.
So the whole point of the book was just think, open your mind up.
Yeah, and I was going back to what we were saying in the kitchen earlier when you were talking about how things land, those flashes of inspiration, they're kind of otherworldly, right? So when you have these ideas, it's almost about keeping it as clean and simple and pure as it was in its first iteration when it landed
That's
in your
important.
head. Yeah.
I think you've really got to get out of your own way
Yeah.
a lot of the time. If I sit down and write a song like a writer, it's all right, it's average. But if I can get out of the way,
Disengage your brain.
just exactly, then there's something else happens,
Yeah.
which is again the purpose behind the pages of just read all this stuff and see what comes up.
Yeah, almost shut your eyes.
Yeah,
Just...
when someone goes, without thinking about it, what's your favourite colour, or
Yeah.
who's your favourite cartoon character?
Yeah.
And you'll just think of something, and then your brain just goes, "Boo."
And then a whole story comes from that.
So we'll see what comes.
Cool.
I forgot to say, when I did your podcast, that actually helped me quite a lot as well.
Brilliant.
Did I mention that at the time? I don't know if I did.
I can't remember.
But I'd spent ages avoiding pretty much interviews, TV, radio. It started off with me convincing myself that I wasn't going to do any of that because, I don't know, I think I did have some sort of convoluted reason behind it that I was playing over in my head, which was, I can't remember what it was. As time's gone on, it's been, any kind of even press interviews or any of those things, I've just, over the last 10 or 15 years, I've just avoided them all.
Sure.
It started to come to a head, and then you asked me to do the podcast. I was quite anxious about it beforehand. I've been doing a bit of CI work with somebody, and God, it was quite amazing actually. We tackled it in one session, and I kind of ended that session, and I think it was about a week before we were going to do it. I didn't have any anxiety at all.
Great. Because you investigated it.
Yeah, it's weird. I didn't have any anxiety about doing it at all in those days leading up. Whereas if I had put myself in that position previous to that, I'd have been like struggling those days before,
Yeah.
So yeah, you were the catalyst for that. So thank you very much.
That's great to
Thank you
hear.
very
And
much.
then, like I said, it was, I suppose, because when you know someone more than someone you don't know, there's a kind of familiarity which I can relax as well.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm getting the nod. It must be that time.
Okay, the nod.
The nod is the trademark M&T inquiry. So you know that we asked you to have a little ponder about 3 songs, or be spontaneous, entirely up to you. But we're wondering, so out of the 3, what your number 1 might be in terms of, we say 3 songs that saved you as a strap line, but I like to soften it a little bit sometimes and just give me 1 song that made a difference along the way for you.
Okay, so the first one I'll go with is from when I was 7 or 8. It's John Lennon, Number 9 Dream. And he just had this impact on me as a kid, where my dad had a plastic owner band Shaved Fish, which is like the best of, I think. And I put it on one Christmas and heard John's voice, and it's quite raw, singing Mother and all these songs, and kind of feeling almost bad for listening to it because it was so intimate, the way he was singing about his feelings. And then I just listened to him on repeat, and Number 9 Dream in a way just opened something up inside of me, but it's quite cosmic, and the sound's really like spectre-ish and beautiful and dreamy, and it just opened my head up. Whatever he's got going on there, it's in me. When you're 7 or 8 and you listen to John Lennon rather than pop or something at that time, because I remember my friends sort of being into, I don't know, whatever music was going on, but I'm into John Lennon, and this is, he is a huge influence on me for many reasons, and that song is probably my favourite solo John song.
Wonderful.
And it just brought me to myself in a certain way, safety there, into those strings, and is one of those songs which is, that's who I am. And
Wonderful.
It gave me myself as a kid, it was like this world to go into.
It gave me myself as a kid.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Let's have a listen to it.
Unfortunately, right now, we haven't been able to clear the licence to play this song. When that happens, we'll update this episode to include it. In the meantime, please click on the link in the show notes to hear the song in full. Oh my gosh, we've got so much to talk about. Elijah and I was loving that song. It was just...
it's quite an ethereal kind of sound.
It is, isn't it? It's ethereal, but it's also that idea as the author saying what they want to say. What I love about music is when you feel like you're surrounded by a universe of sound which feels a bit ethereal and a bit otherworldly. It feels like John's just walking through a song, and the song's like geometric architecture or colours happening.
The other thing I noticed about it, that whole end section, it sounds much more George Harrison than it does John Lennon.
Yeah, it does.
It really does.
That's the great thing about the Beatles' solo careers, actually. They're really good friends, but they've got this legal thing happening, so they're sort of at odds with each other, but their influence upon each other is so big.
It's so vast.
That you can hear on McCartney's stuff sometimes, you're like, well, that's a John solo. It's so imprinted on each other, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So in terms of that song specifically, just trying to get a contrast, really, an idea of what it meant to you then, and you've touched on some of that, but how does it feel actually listening back to it as well now? What's the feeling that you have?
I think it's like the feeling of that magic is possible, and that childhood innocence of just being at wonder of a piece of music or a book or a film is really important. Like crying at the end of a film at the cinema, or just being blown away. Or, I think that state of awe and wonder is something we lose as adults because you've got a tax return to do, or you're gonna, you know what I mean, or you're gonna be
we
late.
Don't have time for
it's
it.
that thing which, because stubbornly, and I suppose in some way I'm quite proud of this, I decided I'm an artist. That's what I'm doing, even if I have to be skint, or I'm doing that because that sense of wonder is more important to me than stability. And it's still that way now. Yeah. If I'm in a mansion or a tent with a guitar and a notepad, I'm all right. On some basic level, I'm all right. It's that thing at school where you had wet time play. So you didn't have to go and play with all the kids and bullies. You could just be on your own drawing or painting. I'm very happy there. That childhood innocence and exploration and wonder, I suppose it's probably quite naive, but it's like who I actually am. So.
That's interesting because you started off before the song talking about it brought you back to yourself.
Yeah.
And it's like you're saying a similar thing. It's like is it the same as an adult now? Does it still bring you back to yourself? It does.
Absolutely. Yeah, it reminds me of to stay on track. Puts me back into that bedroom at 8 in the dark with a Walkman, with those very kind of wire headphones. And it sort of goes, remember him. That's what this is about.
That's who you are.
It's who you are. That wonder, and with your eyes shut and music going on, and it feeling like the shapes and colours happening in your head. That's you.
That's beautiful.
And so that track, it just takes me back to that innocence and that almost naive commitment to make art.
We've asked that question before of other artists, and I'm wondering as you're answering it, whether there's a sense of, when you say you put your headphones on as an adult, or you listen to the music and you go straight back into that state of wonder and awe, how easy is that? Because you also touched on the fact that, I've got bills to pay, or I've got other things going on. I'm just thinking about people sort of listening into this and thinking, I wish I could get back to that state of wonder and awe by putting my headphones on. I'm wondering what gets in the way, and is it just the day-to-day things? What would be your way of getting beyond that? Do you have any hints?
Well, generally for me, my ideal day from just a purely creative point of view is that I get to pick up the guitar or piano or just write something or draw something. If I do that just a bit every day, there's that commitment every day in some way. But that doesn't always happen. So sometimes my inner critic will come up and judge myself for not doing that.
Yeah.
So I developed a system where in my brain I'm always creating.
Of course you've got.
Or I'm always looking
system.
out for something, or I imagine it as just one big linear thing. So even if I don't do something that day, something's being worked out in my head, which is always moving everything towards creativity. Even if I just play that new song I'm working for 5 minutes in the car on the way home, it's like, okay, I've done that today. Yeah. So there's a bit of that, a recognition that if I've got to do a tax return, or got to go to work and gig or something, or I've got to do the practical stuff, you can't avoid that. But I'm in here, in my head, in my imagination world, and in a certain way that is going all the time, and it's developed to a point where it can almost be here now, and at the back of the brain here and here is doing its work whilst we're talking. So it's actually listening to that song whilst we're talking and looking for words. So I developed this system that it's all going on in there, which is probably very annoying to be around, because I'm present but not present sometimes, because it's so full on. Yeah. If I'm writing a new song, for example, and I'm coming towards the last few lines, it's so relentless, the loop of the music, that I can feel like I'm being pushed into the floor. Wow. And so anything that comes up in the real world, it almost feels like, do I have to do that? Yeah. Which probably makes me a little bit impatient and snappy and intolerant
it's not easy,
to that
right?
stuff, because it feels like a intervention into, I just want to do this. It is like naive and childlike. So I guess it's a way of developing how do you allow yourself to be who you actually are whilst having to balance the real world and not letting go of yourself.
What I'm hearing you say is like you're compartmentalizing things in your brain so that you can do the things, but at the same time there's a part of yourself that's almost like keeping yourself in your safe place, which is, you tell me if this is accurate or not.
It is accurate, and actually in terms of, you know, I'm aware that this podcast is called Music and Trauma. In terms of like...
No pressure about that
at all. But in terms of some of my way of being and stuff that I've been through, I have CPTSD and I'm in recovery. So there's like a level of my character which keeps a bit back.
Right.
For safety.
Yeah.
And for...
You've learned that.
Yeah, it's probably the creative mind going, and the way I do that is probably a result to some extent of necessity because of life, but also the sort of CPTSD side of things, which is fear, hypervigilance, hypersensitivity, overthinking, playing out. I suppose I've developed a sense of protection and compartmentalization, which is really useful for creativity, but not a great way to always live, because you have to look at survival techniques and protection, but also challenge those things to push through them. But that can be really scary. It's delicate.
Yeah.
So there's good and bad to your hypervigilance, because I can sometimes think I can tell by the way someone moves their eyebrow what they're thinking or feeling. And sometimes that's correct.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, that's manic, mate.
Well, you're trained, though, in a hypervigilance state, and having had myself complex PTSD for many years, and like you, come through recovery, and those points where the triggers that don't make logical sense to anybody else. For example, if we go to a restaurant, I have to sit in a position where I can see everything. And, you know, I still to this day don't know where it comes from, but the subtle nuances of, I'm looking at you now, and if you looked sideways for a minute, there's going to be a part of me that's saying he's not interested in anything that I'm saying, or he's switched off, or I'm not safe. That it's all about safety. So I'm hearing you say you've got some strategies for yourself, and those strategies have just come out of some sense of awareness of it all. So
that's
you've done a lot of work.
Well, I've done a lot of work, but it's an ongoing process. And
isn't it always?
I think when you start an investigation, or you come to a point where you have to look at something, it can be quite overwhelming and quite scary. But I'm at the point, getting to the point where you can have a little overview. Yeah. Like a record producer, looking at a song going, oh, that string needs to come down, or that bass needs to be changed. If you become aware of these things, you're able to have an overview and watch yourself go into it, and you might not be able to stop it, but it's like, I think you develop a sense of awareness.
Yeah, I love to just bring in at this point something that I use a lot in my work is the power of the pause. It's like having that moment, not to be afraid of the silence, not to be afraid that you're not a part of everything for a few moments, but you're just, okay. And then you just get a sense of where you are in your body, because a lot of the time we don't even notice that our stomachs might be flipping somersaults, but we're just, you know, from the head up, looking at it all, just getting on with it and trying to do all the things. And awareness comes in, and you can almost hover over yourself a little bit. Yeah. And we're all a work in progress, aren't we? We never completely get there. Yeah, absolutely. It's an important point.
Sometimes being aware of something's really terrifying, especially if you've got to look at your stuff and stuff that plays out which isn't so great. Yeah. You don't want to become aware of it. You want to hide from it or not look at it, because there's shame involved. And it's difficult to look at your shadow, difficult to look at shame, but I suppose by becoming aware of it, you can have a deeper understanding. I mean, John Lennon, for example, from that track, is somebody for me, why he's also a hero to me is because he was brilliant and great, but also there's a shadow side to him.
Yes.
What's great about him is he was aware of it and could speak about it, and that's part of his brilliance, really.
The most powerful thing about shame is that it's like a veil. It sits over everything. Often we don't even know that we have shame. There's all these feelings beneath. There might be fear, anger, sadness, grief, but it's all veiled with shame, so we can't even tap into it. So, as you were saying, awareness can sometimes bring terror, and the terror can be very, very real. Yeah. The challenge is to come to terms with the feeling, notice the feeling, sit with the feeling, acknowledge that it is energy that passes through us. Yeah. That it's never, ever going to hurt us in the same way it did when we were that little kid that might have experienced it the first time. That panic that we experience in the present moment with PTSD or complex PTSD, is really that terror returning. And if we can, as adults, sit, acknowledge it, feel it, we will become more comfortable eventually. It disperses, it releases.
It's really interesting what you've just said, because something's just come up as a memory, actually, based upon what you were saying.
Okay.
I was in I've always had trouble to be authentic when I am needing to say something which I fear might make someone angry or sad or upset.
Yeah.
And sometimes not to know what the right thing to do is because of what's the right way to do this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
So I was in a department store when I was about 8 or 9, and my dad had agreed to meet one of his bosses and his wife. So we were in this department store, like those Debenham things where there's like shirts and wallets and everything.
Everything.
I was so uncomfortable in those shops, which is probably why actually, this is all, God, it's all going on now.
Are we coming back to our CPTSD?
Yeah, so,
moment?
you know, there's this boss guy who's my dad's boss. So it's like, okay, you need to be respectful to this boss man. It's my dad's boss, I better be a good boy. But part of me thought, he's probably rich, this guy. And there's a nice Filofax over there, like he might buy it for me. So there's that. But then out the corner of my eye, there was a lift that was shutting, and a fairly elderly woman had gone to go into this lift, but the doors had kind of closed on her arms.
Ooh, wow.
And you could tell it wasn't crushing her, but she got a bit stuck.
Yeah.
And for some reason, because the boss was there and talking to my dad, I didn't feel I could break this conversation to say there's an old lady here who needs some help.
What a moment.
So I then felt really guilty that I didn't say this. Someone sorted it out, but I could see it.
Yeah.
And knew I should go and help, but feeling really bad about not helping this woman, and then feeling bad that I knew it was happening, but I didn't have the courage to say this person's stuck.
Yeah.
And it's such a stupid memory, but again, it kind of goes back to the book where if I wrote something called The Lift, have you ever had experience of the lift? What comes up? Like that, I've just told you all this, so then it's, or maybe there's a piece of art to come from this, you know? But it's those kind of really small things when you look at CPTSD or compassionate inquiry where you become, I have a fear of speaking out because of these conditions around, if I speak out, the boss might be angry or my dad's reputation might be, so I struggle with giving myself the right to have a voice.
Yeah.
That's been a lifelong thing and has become at points very destructive because I've not allowed myself to do that, and that's kind of part of that.
That's a lot, and I would ask you, how does it feel actually saying that out loud now? Because that obviously came to you just from something that I just shared, and it was a very real thing that just landed, and I wonder what's in that for you, and how does it feel to kind of revisit that right now?
I knew this kind of stuff might happen.
Yeah.
And part of me was listening to you speaking and felt quite anxious about, oh God, that's just come up. And I want to say it. But part of me was going, don't say that.
Yeah, interesting. Huh?
And
isn't that the pattern?
That's the pattern. Then there was a quick bit of body wisdom where I thought, I need to say this because it's going to sit with me through the day and not feel great. Because of the trust of knowing you two as friends, it's like, okay.
Say it and
let's
see what happens.
Let's just say that because this is what this podcast is about.
And now you have. And how does it feel?
Good.
No.
It feels...
Can't use a good...
it feels
how do you
a bit
feel?
Indulgent but also intimate, and
they're both actually perceptions rather than feeling
emotions.
words.
Okay, am I looking for an emotion? I feel safe.
You feel safe?
Yeah.
Good.
It's not an emotion either, still a perception.
I feel calm. Is that an emotion?
Yeah, I'll give you that one.
Okay, I feel calm.
Yeah.
Safe, not an emotion. No, I suppose it's not.
No, it's a perception. It's I feel safe. That's like, I'm imagining I'm safe, right? But I feel calm. Yeah, that's how your nervous system might sit.
Okay.
What does calm feel like in your body? I'm just sorry if I push you too much on this, then you can let me know. But this is just what I do.
We're on a couch.
We're on a couch. Yeah. Well, what does it feel like to feel calm? I'm just interested if it's okay to unpick this a little bit, because you went through an anxious state, and then it was your pattern emerging of like, I'm not going to say this, and then it's like, no, got into your body. I'm going to say this because I am in a safe place. And now you have, and there's a sense of calm. You've just been on an entire journey in like a couple of minutes there.
Yeah, so how's your body? That's one of a million journeys in a day.
I know, right? Don't we all do this all the time?
Yeah.
All the time. I'm picking on you because you're talking, but I mean, we all do this, don't we?
Knackering,
it's exhausting.
It is exhausting.
Can you imagine how much we need to rest?
I do sometimes think, does everybody do this? Because it appears like some people don't. I don't know.
Yeah, one day we're going to put you in the chair and you're going to interview Chris and I, and we're going to do this the other way around.
Love to do that.
Absolutely.
Love to do that.
Yeah, well,
You can have me a guest presenter.
Totally, 100%. We've got all of this stuff going on all the time. And whether it's tension in our stomachs, whether it's in our chest, whether we're short of breath, whether we've just got sweaty hands, or whether all of these things are going on. And that was a lovely example of just a cycle of all of it, and how human that was. You being so open about that is going to help a lot of people.
Maybe. I've been listening to a guy called Tim Fletcher, and he talks a lot about CPTSD. And when I first listened to him, I was like, oh my God, this guy's literally unveiling every thought I think, every sponsoring thought. And I sort of felt I'm screwed, because the first, so he does these 10-hour things about anger and CPTSD or shame and CPTSD, and he sort of says it's going to be bad for a while, but wait for the end of the 10 hours and we'll get to the tools to going through it. So you listen to this stuff going, I'm so screwed. But it's really illuminating and enlightening to hear this stuff. My friend's a musician and his father is a musician, and he was selling some headphones, and I needed a spare pair of headphones. So I got in touch with him and said, I'll buy those headphones. And so we arranged to meet on one day, and then I couldn't do it because I was late for something else. Arranged to meet another day, and I couldn't do it. So the third time I was going to go and meet him, but I was going to go and do a gig somewhere, and I had like a 40-minute window. And I wasn't late, but I became aware that you could be late here. He was cool about cancelling the meetings.
Yeah.
But to me, driving into the street, I was sweating, heart was going crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't even need the headphones, okay? It was just like this idea that I was going to be unreliable put me into this really bad situation where I got them and then, okay, just chill out, it's cool.
Yeah.
But that 10 minutes going into it was, why am I so affected by this situation?
Yeah, did you get an answer?
It's because of the judgment of feeling like I'm going to be unreliable, or I'm not good enough, or I'm late, or...
That will have started somewhere.
Yeah, and it's just manic. Really, it's just chill out, mate. You don't need the headphones.
Yeah, what you grew up with and what you were around, it just imprints. And the panic and the fear, it's all completely out of, not out of control, but,
I think it's also, because I've been brought up, from the north of England, and it's part of it's like, man up. So there's that voice in my head as well of like, look at you getting all indulgent about headphones on a podcast. It's like very judgmental, it's like, Jesus Christ, people are listening to this. You're having a kind of little meltdown about your anxieties for being late. But it's also like accepting that as well. It's like an interesting area. But I think for me, what I've learned about CPTSD is this stuff goes on and it comes from some trauma, and I just have to make friends with it somehow. And it's a process, monitor it.
It's also disseminating that story. Because the story becomes, you've got all of this judgment around, oh my goodness, it's only a pair of headphones. But, the point is, there's so much suffering that goes hand in hand with that story. And if we can just get into the story and break it down and see it for what it is, the more we look at it, the more we can separate ourselves from it, and we suffer less. There's a lot of vulnerability there. Thank you. That's huge.
I think as well, it's the purpose of an artist or songwriter is to delve into those areas and try and get it out in some way. I mean, whether you're a record producer or a songwriter or a painter, like the world that you take into your ears and eyes is your inspiration. I suppose in a way you are the canvas. You're a unique point of perception, and there's no one like you.
So create, so do your art and put it out there.
Doing stuff's important. Like my dad certainly was very like get up and get on with things. I've got that about me, and I'm an Aries. I can be quite strong-headed. Sometimes stuff I create is literally, the idea is good, but then discipline kicks in. I suppose because I've been disciplined, it has got used to discipline. So discipline can be seen as a negative thing, but it can be really good. So like, I'd go through this period of writing all this instrumental piano stuff under the name School of Thought, where because the process in the band was very kind of detailed and focused and quite thorough, I needed something which was the exact opposite of that, which was like instinct.
Structured.
Yeah, just like do it, release it. So I came up with this idea that, when I came home from a gig or something, I would sit and compose a piece of music and record it and release it within that night without any editing or thought. Wow. I just need to go bang, 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 and have no expectation, have no need for it to be played on radio. Just go bang. The exact extreme of the other way that we work. So when I recognised I need to do that, this is calling to me, I need to do this thing. There was that fear of like, am I allowed to do that? Because I'm in the band setup, am I allowed to, is it okay that I express this? And of course it's okay. So when I recognised I need to do it, it was the discipline of, I'm going to do this by this date. I'm going to do one a week. There is no editing. Those are the rules. Those are the parameters. And I'm going to have an EP out by this date. Then I'm going to do another one and another one until I've got that out of my system. And then it's out your system. But the great thing about creating that and just going whatever is it finds some audience somewhere.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
I remember one night not wanting to do it. And there was a star in the sky called Capella, which is this star that comes up, I think it's in January, where it flashes green and red. I think it's 2 stars behind each other, but it's a constellation name. So I called the track Capella, but I remember that like going, I can't be bothered to do it tonight. But my discipline side went, you are doing that. And if you don't do it, you are letting yourself down because you say you're an artist.
Wow.
So again, the good side of the critical voice is like, John Lennon would be doing it. So if you want to go to bed and go to sleep, fair enough. But someone else in this world is creating, mate, which is, if it's left unkept, that voice is really absolute. But I went and did this tune, and then it ended up on this Spotify playlist, which is like thousands and thousands and thousands of plays from just this star. I can't make myself do it. So deadlines and discipline sometimes is like as creative as having loads of time.
It's definitely important, though. It wasn't a driving force behind getting me involved in production, but there's something about putting a full stop on the end of the creative process, getting to the end of it. It's quite easy sometimes to get into a mindset where you're doing something creative and it's going to be great when we do this. You know, when we do that, and after we've been through this process, it's going to be great. And it's quite easy to avoid the full stop on the end of the whole thing. But there's something important about the focus and the discipline needed to get that full stop on the end of the...
I totally agree. That was the great thing about doing these co-writing things with 3 hours, because there wasn't time.
Yeah.
And you'd be presenting it to some pretty big songwriters. So you're like, we've got to write this song, I don't even know this person. And you've got to accommodate this other person and their needs.
Yeah.
And there isn't time for the indulgence thing. It's like instinct now. Write it now. As much as you want to create a space for the other person and be nice, what are you good at? What is the best tune? If your tune's better or idea's better, go with it.
Yeah.
But you need to be polite about it, but be strong about it. And so that there needs to be a song by 3 o'clock. And you don't want to live your life with that ramp up stress.
Sure.
But the full stop is as important as the first mark. And in a way, people are scared of the full stop because then they go, is that what I meant to write or say? Have I done enough thorough work on it?
Yeah.
I get that because you've got to be Sherlock Holmes about things. But also it's like, come on, a daffodil happens and then it doesn't happen, right? It's still beautiful. It's not always the perfect daffodil. Just allow it.
Allow it, finish it,
Yeah.
let it be.
Yeah, let it be, man.
Let it be. And that leads us into your song number 2, I think, where tell us a little bit about this. Is another song that's helped you through?
This is a song at the moment which has helped me through, actually. And it's a song called Daydreaming by Radiohead. And I find it quite hard to listen to because I get quite emotional listening to it. But Tom York to me is a genius, and he has a way of push and pull, release and sort of intimacy and openness, which is in this track. It feels quite unnerving at the beginning and quite claustrophobic and quite deep in a way which is like, oh, I don't want to look at that. And then it opens up to something more beautiful. And it's helping me because, or it's saving me, if you like, because it feels like someone else has gone through something. I think that's the great thing about music and songs. It's a chance to find yourself in someone else's work. They've been through something and it helps you.
Yeah.
The opening line is dreamers, they never learn. I think that's such a good line because it's so cutting and so true in a way. Because dreamers sometimes don't learn. You're kind of in your thing thinking it's going to happen and it might not. And there's a full stop to that. So I quite like the beauty of these lyrics and the beauty of the song, but also in a way the reality of what he's saying. So that's why I picked it.
Sadly, we're not able to play this song right now due to a delay in the licensing process. We intend to update this episode as soon as possible, but for now, if you can, please pause the episode and click on the link in the show notes to enjoy the tune in full. It's an interesting tune, though, isn't it? He's always so authentic.
He's hyper aware of himself, I think, as a human and creator. He's been very influential to me as a piano player. He said a really good thing the other day, that he realised that at a certain point, the bit he was trying to hide from everybody, the insecurity or the vulnerability, was the thing that everybody actually was into.
Yeah.
And then when he realised that, he was able to go into it more. Sometimes that song, Mother by John Lennon, or sometimes I get it with Neil Young as well, actually. And with Tom York, it's a bit too intimate.
Bit raw.
Bit raw. And sometimes that feeling can overwhelm me a little bit, particularly the start of that. It's almost like music and sometimes emotions or conversations can be like, I'm not sure I can cope with this. This is like a flooding of kind of feeling.
Yeah.
I tend to go into a state of almost dissociation or needing to ground, which sometimes can be physical, which is like, I need to brace myself for what's coming here, whether it's music or words or conversations. That does it to me, that track. But because of when the chorus almost goes major and sort of opens up into something more positive, it's like, it's okay, just get through to the chorus. But the verse is as important as the chorus. The dark or the shadow or the night is as important as the day and the growth and flowers. We are in a dualistic hologram.
When you're saying that, I want to ask, how do you feel about the feelings? You get a tune like that and it takes you on a journey like that and it gives you an opportunity. So I hear you saying it's overwhelming, your system gets overloaded in a way.
Yeah.
Can that be a good thing?
I think musically and with art it can be, because I think within the parameter of I'm listening to art or music, you're allowed to experience emotions. But for me, the feeling of emotions flooding, if it's to do with like a conversation or intimacy or at a certain point of conversation, when I feel those feelings come up, for me it's like quite difficult.
I hear you.
And I can go there if it's safe. But if it's not safe, for whatever perceived reason, which might be imaginary in my head.
Could be you're being evoked for good reasons, you know?
Yeah, and sometimes though, there is that you can be provoked or evoked for good reasons, but sometimes that can feel unsafe, and that's fine because you get through the unsafe to be like, oh, actually that was important to me, like you were talking about the CIA inquiry into talking on interviews, so there's a positive. But I do think as well there's times where it's not safe.
But what is safety for you?
Safety is, to me, the idea of not being judged, even if you have things that maybe even should be judged.
Yeah.
Within a certain parameter of what society expects, I guess. But there's like a kind of, people talking about shame, it's like, I guess being found out for not being good enough is like, or doing something which is, represents the shadow side of yourself, which I think sometimes we're not even aware of ourselves. So I guess if that gets illuminated for whatever reason, that's really scary.
Having this shadow side. Having those dark spots and how we feel judged when stuff hits our stuff.
Yeah.
Gabor Mate, he talks about the theory of holes. You know, we've all got the holes in ourselves from our upbringings or from experiences, and coming into safety, we can't always guard ourselves from the stuff that hits our stuff. If we've got wounds that are open, if we've got stuff that we haven't yet understood, I wonder what other possibilities there are for keeping ourselves safe in those situations.
I mean, for me, I guess communicating the fact that you're struggling with something right now is important. I think radically accepting that is good. Meditation is, that can definitely shift things for the positive.
So you have a meditation practice yourself?
Yeah, my meditation practice is, I've got a playlist, I put it on, I meditate for half an hour, maybe once or twice a day. Yeah. I'm aware that that isn't like meditation in terms of like, I don't feel like it's official meditation. It makes my body feel like it's connected to something. I think I trip a bit when I meditate and see things and have a little bilocation adventures.
You disappear from this form-based world for a while and have an experience of your own.
Yeah, so that helps. Yeah. And then also like exercise I think is really important, and doing the thing you love, like playing guitar, playing music is a release. So it's like, I think there's ways to release a bit.
What happens if you don't? Does that ever happen, by the way?
Because there'll be creativity going in my brain, so it will be happening. There is like sometimes if I feel like I've done a week's worth of practical admin stuff, it's like,
you feel it in your whole system.
Yeah.
Got it.
What about you though, Chris? Because you've got a job in which you have to be quite practical and quite on top of things because it's part of your job, right? Yeah. Processes, deadlines and work, and then there's creativity in that. Actually, the real world of being organised is important to what you do fundamentally, but then there's the creativity. So that, do you get that sense of needing to be creative within?
Yeah, I think that in an ideal world, we'd all wait around for, I had it explained to me by somebody once, where there's like a rail of creativity and you're able, at certain points, you're able to hook onto it. Yeah. And other points where it's a bit unreachable. Yeah. And I think in an ideal world, you'd be able to wait around for all of those moments where you can hook onto the rail. But the practical realities of creativity quite often don't allow you to do that sometimes. So, yeah, it's a bit of a tricky balancing act.
So back to that song, I'm just wondering, like, is there anything sort of specific, you know, when you first heard it that really sort of pulled you in?
There's a video, I saw at first the video on YouTube where Tom is walking through lots of different doors looking for something, and then he just sort of climbs up to a hill where there's a little fire and sits there. Quite often for me, videos or even the way an artist will look will get me. So that video, when it came out, I was like, wow, that's great. Listen to the album, and sometimes, I don't know if you get this, but I listen to some albums and go like, that's amazing, can't handle it right now. And then it'll come back round later, and it's come back round later, that album right now. I guess we don't ever really know why someone writes a song, but I know that his wife passed around that kind of period.
Okay.
Or his ex-wife passed around that period. So I think he's sort of going into something there. There's a kind of depth to it. When I was growing up, my grandmother had MS, and it was quite bad. And so we grew up with a gran who was beautiful and brilliant, but she couldn't talk. And so sometimes you'd be listening to her kind of try to say something, knowing that she wasn't going to ever say that thing.
Oh, that's right.
So growing up, watching someone try to say something which you knew was not going to happen as a little boy is kind of quite shocking to see.
Yeah.
She was going to get worse and passed away. I think I was like 10. So I remember going, I can't go to that funeral because I can't handle the level of emotion within me, and to be in that level of emotion, I can't handle it.
Right.
So I stayed with a friend instead and took the protective survival route. And so that song, maybe it's because I presume he's writing it from that point of view about her. There's a fragility and reality to those opening chords, and that idea of dreamers never learn, like a finality to. So it feels a bit uncomfortable for me, but also it's necessary. It's really overanalyzing.
I think it is perfect, and the fact is things draw you in for a reason, and it might just be exactly where you are in that moment.
And it's what's funny is over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've listened to that album quite a lot, and the first track's really more anthemic, and then that happens straight after. And I've been resisting that song for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So that's been the thing of like, what's going on with you?
Oh,
there
that's
with this
interesting.
song? And maybe even just talking about it now has made me understand why that piece of art is impacting me right now. And I think art and music does that. They twig in your brain, or someone catches your attention because you work something out. What's this about? You know?
Yeah, it catches
Follow the
you.
thread.
Well, listen, that was a really big one for you.
Yeah.
So we're on to number 3.
The band that saved me time and time and time and time again are The Verve, as I'm sure you're aware.
Okay.
I mean, the amount of times their music has really restored me. And it's for many reasons, because I think they're a really interesting band. Because you've got the songwriting element, which is very strong, but the band as a band is really strong. And each element is like a kind of force or a compass point. They're all as strong as each other. And so I have been obsessed with them, I think, really, for a long, long time. And I got to know this song because there was an Ashcroft front cover in Mojo magazine around the time of Alone with Everybody, where he was talking about the new record and going back and talking about some of the other records. And I had all the other stuff and the EPs, but I hadn't bought Storm in Heaven yet. So I was about 19 at art college. He spoke about this album being a bit of a lost classic, so I went and got it. And I remember being at art college with loads of friends, actually, just talking about life, and put the headphones on, thought I'm going to listen to this. There was probably a bit of an illegal substance around at the same time. And it opens up with Star Sail, which is just this chord, and then this thing happens. And as soon as I heard it, it was like everything that's inside my head is in this piece of music. Every way they go, every chord that they play, every note, every bass line, drum beat and vocal melody sounds like the internal system of my imagination and head. And I want to live in that place. I almost don't want to make music like it because I can't. So I want it to remain mysterious and be this kind of world I can walk into. And time again, that music, that saves me, that track. McCabe is a genius. He has this connection to fluidity of sound, which is just beyond anything. People that like that song or know that song, I feel like they know me intimately and I know them intimately in a way which is
That's
like
incredible.
a mysterious, private, safe look at the universe. It's ethereal and massive and delicate. The sound of heaven and hell and colour. It's got everything. The reason it saves me is because, I mean, I listen to that album more than any other album. It's my favourite album. it just restores me back to me.
Mm.
It's the sort of thing I put on late at night and just float off and go to where I need to go to.
Let's have a listen.
Unfortunately, right now, we haven't been able to clear the license to play this song. When that happens, we'll update this episode to include it. In the meantime, please click on the link in the show notes to hear the song in full. So that song met you when?
I think I was 19. Foundation year at art college, finally feeling like I was fitting in, like I'd found my people, like I was an artist, other people were. And so it was like a hedonistic time, but also a time of finding my tribe, you know, a lot of communal experiences. Like I said, it just was like,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, when you become a fan of someone, it's like I always take the mick out of myself because it's sort of ridiculous.
Why?
The levels of like fandom, they just are like water to me, that band.
Just washes through you,
Yep.
it just becomes
It's like
you.
oxygen, whatever that dynamic is, whatever the hell's going on, you know, it just works.
How is it now? Is it the same as you when you first heard it? Or is it
That's
different?
the thing, it's like it's the same with Bittersweet Symphony, because I nearly picked that, but then was like, you know, for other reasons I didn't. But it's like that just goes smack.
I hear
So
that,
it's like the refresh thing. So it just takes me backwards and forward. You know when you get like a, I don't know, like a salad after pasta? Or like a drink of water after a hot day or something. It just goes back.
Well,
That's an element of what it does to me. You know that Frank Zappa thing about talking about music, it's like dancing for architecture, it's that kind of thing, but it's big.
I feel that we can't touch on a Verve track without bringing Chris into the conversation at all. So, you know, can you just have some ponderances here as well, some questions for Elijah at this point?
You know, Urban Hymns is the record that most people would know of theirs, but both the first two albums are, magical in their own separate ways. 3 incredibly different records.
4.
4, of course.
Oh,
Yeah,
goodness
you know, like,
me,
no,
Chris. Whoopsie,
but I
might have
know
to
you-
edit that bit out.
But I know that you were massively involved with that, but it's like, the thing is, if you take those 4 records, they're all, like you say, so different,
Yeah,
and stepping stones as well.
I think the first one, that has that ethereal, otherworldly quality to it, that record.
Yeah.
And the second one is just super dark,
Yeah, it is. It is
but
super
in a
dark.
great way.
But it's also that thing in Urban Hymns which kind of started to happen on Northern Soul, where there's oblivion and ecstasy, there's hope and there's dark. Because Urban Hymns, people automatically think of the singles.
Yeah,
But the beauty of the album is, as well as the singles and big songs, there's quite a lot of dark, far out stuff going on.
yeah, there's a lot of jamming going on.
Yeah, and that record's pretty involved.
How has it helped you, that song?
How does it help me? That's a really good question. How has it helped me?
Just before you do, that song actually does make me feel a particular way
Oh, go
Cool.
on.
whenever I hear it. And I'm not wholly sure, I started this sentence without knowing how I was going to finish it. But, and every time I hear it, it makes me feel that particular way. And it's a bit euphoric,
Yeah.
but it's also got melancholy to it.
Yeah.
So it covers a few different areas.
That's how it
Yeah.
is. How does it make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel euphoric and melancholy
Yeah.
Okay.
at the same time, which is
Yeah.
quite...
That's the
quite,
thing. You're right about that. It's just the feelings at the same time. But to answer that question, how it helps me, I think, well, in a way, what Chris has said is really, it helps me access that, actually. It helps me access those feelings. I think sometimes with feelings, you can get like a dichotomy of feelings in life. Like you can feel happy and sad.
It's
Yeah.
true.
And
yeah.
you can feel sort of tense and calm. And sort of excited and nervous. And,
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I
exactly.
quite often get that where, you know, how can you be feeling 2 extremes at the same time? It's like, well, quite easily. So it helps me access that area Chris has spoken about.
Yeah.
It's hard to sort of quite decipher.
Just moving on a little bit.
Yeah,
This is a really big question.
go for it.
This can be as out there as you want it to be, or as intimate as you want it to be. Your thoughts, really. It's not a question so much as I'm just pondering your thoughts about music and mental health in the same sentence.
I think they're very joined together. I think music can really help restore your mental health.
Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, because I think sometimes when you're experiencing something, communication with someone else is not what you need.
Right.
and you need space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes music or a song can be the only thing that can actually deliver you or understand you in that space, or cuddle you in that space, or heal you in that
Oh,
space.
lovely.
I mean, that thing of like dementia patients where they can't remember anything when they hear a piece of
Yeah.
music, and it's like obviously it works in a certain way.
Yep. Uh-huh.
You see it sometimes if you put disco on. Like, unless you're a complete, it can really change the mood pretty quickly. Not that disco is the answer to melancholy, but I actually find if I'm in a certain space which would be considered anxious or depressed or whatever, I need to go and listen to music which is almost anxiety driving and depressing.
So it helps you sit in those feelings and kind of just
absolutely,
experience that.
but sit in it and be alright, rather than cheer up music or something which is like, oh, it's two primary colours right now. Music is mental states put into sonic language. So I think the two things are really super combined. I think music's really important. I mean, I'm sure most songwriters feel like this. It's like you only have to listen to like the words and music and notes of what you've created to go like, you want to know what my mental state's like? There it is, on record, go and listen to it. I was thinking about this on the way going, not sure I'm that great at life, but I know the stuff I've created is probably who I really am. There's a certain point last year where I couldn't listen to music. It's like, I can't listen to a thing. It's going to make me feel things I don't want to feel right now. And I start to play something like, nope, get it off.
Is that because the emotions were too raw?
Yeah, just in a state of absolute overwhelm. And it's like, I cannot afford at this moment to be taken into a space of emotional overflow.
I got you.
So I'm going to have to like block out all.
So your tool in your toolkit was to withdraw. Yeah.
Sometimes I think with isolation and withdrawing is quite important.
It's a safety mechanism.
Yeah.
And making that okay, not making that wrong.
Yeah. I mean, the hermit is an archetype, right?
Yeah.
It's in the tarot. If you're a creator, you definitely need to be in a hermit state.
Yeah.
And I think if you're looking at anything which is deep and maybe involving trauma or self-actualization, you're going to need to be a hermit sometimes.
Some of the time, yeah.
And that's absolutely an archetypical thing that I think we'll go through. Whether it's like 5 minutes peace and quiet or kind of...
Yeah, or a duvet day. It's like, you know, sometimes it's just like, no, let the world take... A lovely friend of mine gave me that expression. She knows who she is, Joanna. You just let the world take a spin without you. Can that be okay?
Like, it took me a long time and I still haven't got there to be able to... I actually need to go and just lie down or something.
Yeah.
Because the guilt thing comes up of like, you're lying down, self-critical comes up.
Exactly.
You know, like you're wasted. So it's like, I've found it very difficult to take a day off or time off. Because I think as well, maybe you find as well, like, as a creative, it's like, it fuels who you are. The need to create is quite compelling. Do you find it sometimes hard to get off that?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Like almost like the fear of stopping work is anxiety driving sometimes.
Yeah. I go through different phases of that. Sometimes I do find it easy to step away, but other times it's not.
I can't do that.
Now, a lot of people find that really challenging. I find it more challenging than you. But once the door's gone and we've left the building, you're just like, okay.
I definitely relate to that thing of, you know, if you're in the process of working on a record, I can come out of here and go into the house, and sometimes, not always, I won't want to hear other music.
Yeah.
Because you've spent, 12 or 14 hours listening to and focusing and kind of crafting and chiseling. And
I think I exist in that state quite a lot. This is weird. Music for me is quite private. In my car, for example, if I put Star Sail on and somebody didn't like it, it would be difficult.
I didn't ask for your opinion.
Don't you hate it when people get in the car and you've got your music on and then, I've just got to turn it off?
Yeah, like you said, I didn't need the judgments on it. I just need to be with it.
Okay, so we're coming to the end, so I'm just wondering how you're feeling. You know how I can't give you anything but feeling words.
I guess feeling neutral. It's like we've been on a journey together, calm and quite neutral.
Would content cover it?
Yeah, content in my neutrality. Let me just finish with this last story because this is great. There's a really good story about a Chinese farmer. Him and his son have a farm and they grow turnips. And the old man's plough breaks.
Okay.
And they make money off these turnips. So the son says, Dad, this is a disaster. We're not going to be able to plough these turnips. We're going to make no money. And the farmer says, well, I can't call it. It's a disaster, Dad. And he's like, well, it is what it is. I can't call it. If it's good or bad, I can't call it. So the next day, their horse, who they work the land with, then runs off. And the son, again, is like, this is a nightmare. The villagers come round. What are you going to do? There's going to be no food. You're going to hit poverty. The son's crying and the farmer says, I can't call it. What's happened has happened. I can't call it. The following day, the son opens the door to see the horse coming down the hill with 10 other horses. And he opens the gate and all the horses come into the paddock. And he says, Dad, we don't have to plough turnips anymore. We've got horses. This is going to be easy. We can make loads of money and it's going to be great. We could even sell some horses and race them. And the Chinese farmer again, I don't know why he's Chinese, but the farmer then says, well, I can't call it. It is what it is. The following day, the son comes out and he's trying to tame a horse and gets kicked and breaks his arm. So now he's scared because his Chinese dad, I think he's Chinese as well, this son. His dad hasn't got the strength to deal with the horses, so, you know, it's disaster again. And his father says, I see what you're saying, son, but I can't call it. The following day, some samurais come down the hill on horseback and say, we need your son for battle. Men of a certain nation need to come and join us to fight the army. So we need your son. He's got to enlist. And the Chinese farmer says, I would give you my son, but he's broken his arm. So he's not going to be able to join you. So they go and check him out and say, yeah, he's legit. He's broken his arm. He's no use to us. So the samurai army get back on the horses and drive off the gate. And in that evening, they face complete oblivion to the Chinese army that wipe out the whole samurai unit. Obviously, the lesson of the story is good and bad are judgments. State of neutrality about things. This is going to pass. This too shall pass, which is in recovery. Like the bad situation will pass, and the good situation is going to pass. So don't commit too much to the negative or positive because it's going to change. So to be in a state of neutrality or acceptance without too much emotion is actually sometimes quite a good place to be in, because it frees you from the drama or the mania or reaction to what's going on. And that's, for me, what I suppose, because you asked, what neutrality is just like, I'm without judgment of what is going on right now.
Great story and a great state as well to be in. I love that. Neutral is something to aspire to.
Yeah.
What an amazing guest. Amazing. We
having
knew
me.
you would be,
Thanks so much.
but that was mind-blowing, and we went to a lot of places and that was really, really incredible.
We've got a couple of things just to do.
Yeah, we do. We want to know, how people can find you. And we've talked about the podcast, we've talked about the book, and we just really want to point people to those because there's so much there for people. And it doesn't matter whether you're an accomplished singer-songwriter, whether you're just somebody who's never done it before, who just wants to maybe tackle some poetry, just pick up the book and take a look and just...
Yep, it's on Amazon. It's called The Songwriters Handbook by Elijah Wolfe, with an E, actually, for Wolf. And the podcast, Songwriting for Songwriters, is on Spotify and YouTube. My band, The Gravity Drive, is thegravitydrive.com, but all on Spotify and everywhere else.
Excellent.
Or my piano stuff's called School of Thought, so there's lots of piano
brilliant.
stuff
Yeah.
on Spotify. Yeah.
Great. Also, if you do find yourself enjoying any of these episodes, please consider making a small donation to the charities which we're supporting, which are Nordorf and Robbins Music Therapy or Youth Music UK. Links are on the show notes.
We just want to ask what song of yours that you've chosen to play us out today. And the other thing I don't feel we spent enough time on, and that's just always the way of it, isn't it? You always miss something, but something really, really important is the Gravity Drive. The music that you've managed to produce with Ava, it is absolutely phenomenal work.
Thank you.
Please, everybody, check that out too. And in fact, I believe you're going to play us out with one of those tunes today.
Yeah, I think we'll pick something that Chris was involved with. And so I'm going to pick Shooting Star because the reason being is the Wildlight's full of different kind of songs. There's like ballads and it's sort of mood shifts, but Shooting Star is great vocals from Ava on that. And also there's a bit Chris did, and there's like a Chrisism in that track.
Is there? What is it?
And it's my favourite bit of the entire record, where you just allow a delay on one word to bounce. And I remember the first time hearing it and going, there it is. The great thing about working with other people is like that quote about what you lose in control, you gain in collaboration, which is a good one.
I like that.
I didn't see that coming, and it's just Chris's impact. It's all over the record, obviously, and Ava's on the record, and Ryan, and co-producer Paul Knight, and John Davis, rest his soul, the mastering engineer, who made a massive impact to it, actually. The contributions are there, but like, as we're here with Mr. Potter and Mrs. Potter, I think we'll choose Shooting Star. But every time I hear it, I think, thanks, Chris. Because that element was like, I was kind of looking for that somewhere in my head when I was 15, and you've just delivered it, and I don't know why or how you did it, but you've managed to get the thing I was looking for there.
Great. Let's hear it.
If you could know the future, would you feel the same? If you had all the answers, would you question it again? My love is like an ocean, sea change from day to day. For a heart to be reopened, you gotta get out of your way. And all that I am, all that we are, and all that you want, and all that you ask, and all that it takes, and all that it scars, I'd follow you anywhere. You're like a shooting star. You're like a shooting star. If you could start all over, would you be here now? Riding on this supernova, we'll make it through somehow. But my love is like the morning, chasing dark away. I'm still searching for that feeling, then losing it again. And all that I am, all that we are, and all that you want, and all that you ask, and all that it takes, and all that it scars, I'd follow you anywhere. You're like a shooting star. You're like a shooting star. Yes, you are. And all that I am, all that we are, and all that you want, and all that you ask, and all that it takes, and all that it scars, I'd follow you anywhere. You're like a shooting star.
Okay, here's the legal stuff. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. We are not licensed therapists, and this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. See you next time.